Hi everyone, here we are with Chapter 6. We're in the second module of the class. There's essentially 3 modules. The first one was really just sort of an introduction and background, general marketing information. This one we're going to get a little bit more in depth, talking about picking your strategy, which is essentially focusing on your customer and also your product. And then we are going to go into 3 of the 4 Ps. What are the 4 Ps again? Product, price, place, and promotion. So in this section, we're going to talk about, as I said, customer strategy, deciding upon who your customer is going to be, and then also what exactly the details on the product. And then we're going to talk about products and services, and then we're going to talk about the second P, price, and the third P, place. Okay, so here we go, Chapter 6. So as I said, talk about 2 things. We're going to select your customer over here, who the customer is going to be, and then on this side, what's up with the product itself. So with the customers, we talk about segmentation and targeting, and with the product or the value proposition, we talk about different. How is your product different? And what makes it better? Like, what is that competitive advantage to your competitor? And then what do customers think of your product in comparison to other ones in the same category? Okay, so there's segmentation variables. Essentially, there's 4 of them: geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral. So geographic is just that. It's an area, a nation. It can be a nation, it can be a region, it can be states, it can be counties, cities, population density. It can be based on climate. Anything that has to do with geography. Then demographic, we've talked about demographics before. Demographics, of course, are an objective way to measure populations, including age, life cycle stage, gender, income, occupation, education, religion, ethnicity, and the generation that you're from. Remember, we talked about that. There's Generation Y, Generation X, baby boomers, that kind of thing. Psychographic is your social class, your lifestyle, your personality. So essentially, how do you spend your time and money, and what are your attitudes and opinions? And behavioral is why did you buy the product, and how do you use the product, and how loyal are you to a certain brand? So you could say that a segment would be men in the northeastern United States who are single, have an income of $150,000 or above, are professionals, and are interested in physical fitness and education, and they work out on a 4 to 5 times per week, and have no particular loyalty to any brand. That could be a segmentation. That could be a segment, a market segment. Okay, so again, we just go through these geographic, dividing it into different geographical units. The demographic, we've talked about that. More about demographics. So age and life cycle, just remember that age does not dictate life cycle. So life cycle is essentially, it's, child, education, single, married, children, empty nest, retired. Those are different, like, life cycle stages, so to speak. And then the other one's gender and income. Okay, psychographic, essentially how people spend their time and money. And also somewhat to a certain extent of social class. Remember, social class is not just income. Social class also includes things such as your education level, generational wealth, your occupation, that kind of thing. So, and that doesn't necessarily even have to be generational wealth. It can just be wealth in general. Just because someone has a high income doesn't mean that they have a lot of money. It just means they have a high income. And just because someone has a low income doesn't necessarily mean they don't have a lot of money either. They just have a low income. Anyway, so that reflects people's lifestyles, and the products they purchase reflect their lifestyles, reflect their lifestyle. The other thing to think about, remember we were talking about in Chapter 5 about behavioral variables and reference groups and social groups and all that kind of thing. That also plays a role in psychographic. Okay, behavioral, we talked about that. Talked about that briefly already. So, why do they buy the product? Do they buy it because it's peer pressure? Do they buy it because it's an emergency and they need to buy it? Do they buy it because they really need it? And how do they use it? Do they use it often? Do they use it, are you buying a pickup truck to use every day to go to work? Or are you buying a pickup truck just to use on the weekends when you go to your rental property? Or did you buy a pickup because you need it because you go hunting and so you just use it on weekends or maybe, certain times during the year? And then what kind of benefits, what kind of extras are you looking for? Are you looking for, a warranty? Are you looking for, with the car, are you looking for, all sorts of bells and whistles on the car, that kind of thing? Okay, so again, just a little bit more on behavior and in different detail about behavior. Okay, so essentially, rarely, if ever, is the answer to the question, what is the market for that product, everyone? Because you need to focus somehow. We're all so different, and you need to focus somehow so you know how to communicate with them. And if you watch on commercials, the people that they depict in the commercial, what they're dressed like, where they live, what their activities are, that's the segment they're going after. So you can see it helps them to understand people better and communicate with them better and narrow it down. So this whole idea of requirements for effective segmentation, measurable, are there enough people out there? Can you find them? Do they have enough substantial, is it substantial enough to warrant putting money in to look for them? Differentiable in terms of, is there a difference? Do men look at soda different than women look at soda? Then if they don't, you don't go for a different target on that. You don't go for a different market segment on that. You don't divide it by gender. You just focus on men and women. Do men buy skis differently than women buy skis? Do people in the northeastern United States look at grocery store products different than people in the southern part of the United States? Is it enough of a difference to go after them, to segment them out in that way? And then actionable, are there ways to reach them? Okay, so after that is market targeting. So essentially think about segments as just a bunch of different dots, right? Or groupings, if you will. And then targeting is picking which one of those dots you're going to go after, right? So you want to evaluate them. Is there growth potential? Is there, do they have the ability to buy the product? Do they go along with the company objectives? That kind of thing. And then the target market is the set of buyers that have some similar characteristics, that are like-minded, that the company is going to go after. Okay, so there's a couple different targeting strategies you can use. Undifferentiated is going just without any kind of segmentation. Toothpaste is often undifferentiated. Milk would be undifferentiated. Now of course milk, there's a variety of different kinds of milk, but generally speaking, milk is undifferentiated. Butter, eggs, that kind of stuff. Differentiated is having segments. Concentrated or niche marketing is this idea about going after a large share of a significant share of a larger market. So they talk in the book about Whole Foods, which is the mostly organic grocery store. But they're going after the grocery store market. They're going after people who buy groceries. And they're going after a certain income level, but they want a large portion of that of the group that's more maybe health focused. And then micro marketing, which is also referred to as individual marketing or local marketing, goes after people on a one-by-one basis. It's very, very narrow. Usually for higher end products that could be customized. Okay, so when you're trying to decide what your target strategy is going to be, there's some factors you want to consider. How much money do you have? Can you afford to go after multiple targets? Are your products different enough from each other? The product's life cycle stage, which might not make sense to you right now, but we're going to talk about that more in Chapter 8. And every product has a different life cycle, just like we have life cycles. And You're going to go after things, that when it's in the growth stage, it's different than when it's in the maturity or decline stage. Um, Market variability, is there that much different between the markets? And what are your competitors up to? You're always wondering what your competitors are up to. All right, so there's also this whole idea of socially responsible marketing. Essentially, you do not want to take advantage of underprivileged or underserved populations, particularly when we talk about poor or low income, or people who have some sort of vulnerability. Um, you don't want to give people harmful products. You want to make sure the pricing is appropriate. You want to make sure that they're available in the right retail outlets. So again, this whole idea of social responsibility is that you should be thinking about the interest of the company, the interest of those targeted, and also interest of society at large. Okay, so that's really we've talked about the customer. That's all the customer stuff. Who are we going to go after, and how are we going to make it? How are we going to find them, and is it a viable market, and all that kind of thing. So the next thing we want to talk about with strategy is the product itself. So that's when we get into this whole idea of differentiation and positioning. So there's the product position, and it's how is the product defined by customers? How do customers think about your product? How do customers think about Subway versus McDonald's? How do people think about Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts versus Tim Hortons? So how is it defined? What's the position in the market? Is it a high service, high quality, low cost? Is it high cost, high quality? How do they compare it? We're going to look at something in a minute that might pictorially explain that more. You have to have a product that's different than the other products. Otherwise, why are people going to buy yours over theirs? Okay, positioning. So how is the product defined by customers on important attributes? And it's also consider the place the product occupies in consumers' minds relative to competing products. So if that's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo words on the page, which is understandable if it is, maybe this will help. It's a positioning map. This is straight from the book, and essentially they've taken the SUV market, right? Everyone's familiar with sport utility vehicles, and compared them. And essentially looking at price on one side, and then at the other side, two features that the car might have. Is it a luxury car, or is it more of a performance car? So I just want you to take note here about the cost on the side. It starts at $45,000 and it goes up to $85,000. So it's a really high end. These are high end sport utility vehicles. The most performance are the ones, the Toyota Land Cruiser and the Land Rover Range Rover. And then that's on the performance side. On the luxury side, it's the Lexus. Sort of this in the middle is the Cadillac Escalade, the Infiniti, and the Lincoln Navigator. So, people buy sport utility vehicles. Initially a sport utility vehicle was just that. It was a utility vehicle, with the Range Rover really being sort of the granddaddy of all sport utility vehicles. But as they became more accepted into the mainstream, and people were using them in urban and suburban areas as opposed to rural areas, luxury became more important. And so they started opening up. They really created this market for them. Like you can think about another market similar, UGG boots. I'm sure most of you are familiar with UGG boots. UGG boots, I don't know, do any of you know what UGG boots were originally for? Actually, were sheep herders, worn by sheep herders in Australia. So now they've become this, fashion staples for young women. They positioned them. They created this new story about about those boots. Same thing with the SUV. So what is it that people are looking for? And what we see really is that not many people are looking for performance. Most people are looking more for luxury and a relatively lower price on the car. And it gives an idea. The circles are reflective of the market share that they have. And it gives you an idea about, so if your Lexus, you know that you are the high-end, high-price luxury vehicle. And that's how people view you. And that's how you're going to market it. And that's those are the kind of people you're going to put in your ads. It's kind of a dual thing. It's the people you put in your ads and the people that you go after, and then also how people see you. As opposed to the Land Rover the Range Rover, the Land Rover, Range Rover, and the Toyota Cruiser, their ads are going to be people, going up the sides of mountains in mud, or, going through terrible terrain and across fields and rocky roads and that kind of stuff. Whereas the other ones might show people going out to dinner in the middle of a city. So anyway, that's just an idea, so this visual representation. You can do it with any kind of product. You could do it with soap. You can do it with shampoo. You can do it with, um, passenger cars. You could do it with hotels. You could do it with just about any product. Okay, next one. Identifying possible value differences and competitive advantages. So competitive advantage is very important. Competitive advantages is how are you different from your customers? How do you create value? It's usually either through lower prices or more benefits. So you can differentiate in all sorts of different ways. The services you provide, you could do it when we're talking about channels, we talk about where the product is sold. Is it available many places, or is it just available certain places? We're going to talk more about that when we get into the place chapter. What's your image? So essentially this whole idea of competitive advantage is, what is it that you do better than your competitor that creates more value for the customer that you're going after? Okay, so then there's the whole idea of the positioning statement. And this is, you can see it in the next slide. They kind of go together. So the idea is that the positioning statement summarizes the brand positioning. And the format of the positioning statement is to who's your target segment and need. So you're going to see this in the next slide, but it says to busy multitaskers who need help remembering things. That's your target segment. Busy multitaskers who need help remembering things. And then you talk about the brand, in this case it's Evernote. And then what's the concept? A digital content management application that makes it easy to capture and remember moments and ideas from your everyday life. So it's the concept is that it's a digital content management, and the point of difference is the ease. So here you go. So flipping it the other way, to the target segment, the brand, the concept, and the difference. So just to give an idea about how people look at themselves differently, how companies look at themselves. Okay, and then finally, this whole idea of communication. We're going to talk about this again later in the semester. Integrated marketing communications, oh so important, that you always have everything matches all of the company marketing mix efforts, those 4 Ps. Support the position strategy. So if it's a high-end brand, you want to sell it in high-end stores. If it's something that's for everyday usage and convenience, it's something that you want to be able to sell in places that are accessible to people, and also you want to communicate that in your promotions and your promotional efforts, your advertising and your public relations. You want to make sure that the people who are in your ads reflect the group you're going after, that kind of thing. And you want to make sure that this is consistent. The idea of integrated marketing communications is that everybody in the company and all activities are focused on one thing and one thing only. And then finally, this idea that the position should constantly be monitored because things change. As we learned when we talked about the marketing environment, the external marketing environment, technology is always changing, culture is always changing, rules, government regulations are always changing. There's natural availability of natural resources is always changing. So these are things that you constantly want to monitor, and then you want to change your product position as time goes on. Okay, that's it with chapter 6, and we'll see you back here with chapter 7. Thanks, guys.